Hi, I'm Danielle, and I'm so glad that you're here because together we're going to work through big stuff. Hello and welcome to the Big Stuff Summer Series. I'm super excited about this series because we've had a bumper first season and I had so many fantastic conversations with amazing people, and I noticed a number of themes started to really emerge. So this summer series is going to be pulling together some of those themes into all the juicy gems. So this episode, we're digging into what are you left with when the thing that defines you goes away. I quit writing for magazines years ago after losing a job that I loved, and I subsequently lost my self-esteem along with it. I remember standing in my kitchen just thinking, who am I if I'm not this? Who am I if I'm not a writer? That's what I had done for years, and it had really become so much of my identity. And now I'm finding myself standing in like the metaphorical kitchen again. I'm in a really big life-changing moment where I have experienced the death of a parent, which is often known to be a huge transformational period because of many different things, regardless of what your relationship is like with the person that you've lost. Deep grief forces us to look at things differently and often makes us ask some really big questions. And the question that I'm really asking now is, who am I? And definitely, what is it all about? And the times where I've asked this question can be very destabilizing. But I'm not asking this question at the moment about about a job title. I'm not asking, who am I outside of a job title? I'm a coach, I'm an author, I'm a speaker. They're words, they're a series of sounds put together and they're things that I do. But this time has done really nothing if not sort of stripping away my ego, which is very uncomfortable, and it leaves you pretty naked when you're in that space. The questions that I'm really asking now is more than like, who am I? It's what makes a beautiful life for me, and what is achievement for me if no one else is watching and if there's no reward for it. And being able to sort of view this through the lens of my mum, who wasn't able to do much for 20 years of her life, and yet I have been able to really witness the huge impact that she has had on people and the world simply by being who she is. These kinds of this is what I'm thinking about. I'm supposed to be having some time off, but I'm really digging deep into a lot of my understanding of spirituality, of who I am, of how the world works, what is consciousness. Like, I'm doing deep dives on all sorts of things, including the different things that make me who and how I am. So where this really came together in the first season is around our identity being wrapped up in our achievements and who we are, and what we do being who we are, and then all of the external validation that comes from that shapes how we feel about ourselves. And when I saw these themes really emerging time and time again, I really wanted to weave together these stories for you, these stories of a pro surfer who lost everything, a business owner who removed one tiny word from her vocabulary to create really big internal changes, and a woman who trained to go to outer space, right? Trained to go to Mars. And then, of course, my mum, who really taught me that your worth has nothing to do with the thing that you do for money, right? What you do for money is not what your value is. Perhaps more accurately, it's what you do when you think no one is watching. It's what you do when you are under pressure and being called to show up in greater service of others or in greater sense of love. This is more, I believe, who you are and what, I guess, shapes your, I don't want to say value, because I feel like that again sort of puts a number or a figure on something, but your intrinsic worth, let's say. So this episode is about the lie, I think, that many of us have been sold over our lives, and then probably often now even sell ourselves, and that is that we are only as good as what it is that we achieve. Cooper Chapman was a professional surfer in his athletic peak. He was top 100 surfers in the world, sponsored, traveling, living the dream. I mean, it doesn't get much better for a young guy who loves to surf. One day when he was like still killing it in his career, his sponsor dropped him, saying that they didn't believe that he would be able to get to the level that they needed him to be at in order for them to continue supporting his dreams. Now, that when he was doing well in his mind, that it rocked his self-esteem. Everything he thought he knew about his self-worth collapsed. That can be catastrophic for anyone at any age. But instead of it being something that broke Cooper, it pushed him into a new direction, but it took a little bit of help, shall we say, to get there. Let's see what he had to say about it.
So in surfing, you get sponsorships, and that sponsorship money is basically how you fund your career. And I was sponsored by a pretty big brand, making about $50,000 a year. Had my best year ever, and I was like, sweet, prime age, 22, I'm trending forward. Every year I'd done better. And then they said, sorry, we don't think you're going to make it. And at the time, my manager was like, oh, we'll find you another sponsor. It's all good. And then it kind of, time went by, the industry was kind of struggling, and I couldn't find any support. So my mindset just went into major victim mindset, 22 years old, had sort of quite a lot of probably ego behind me at that stage up through that late teen years. I sort of used it as a protection mechanism. And, so much of my self-worth was on external validation, what everyone else thought of me. When I was doing well in my comps, I felt amazing. Everyone would pat you on the back. And when I was doing poorly, I felt pretty average. And after losing that sponsor, I set myself on a bit of a downward spiral, because I went from, making this money to support my career to making nothing. And I had to go and get a full-time job, which, not complaining about that at all. But at the time I went from, I can just go surfing all day till after work. So I went on this bit of a spiraling downward mindset and was, pretty victimized and just felt like the world was against me. And then I was lucky enough to be selected to go to the first ever Olympics training camp for surfing. And they took sort of the top 10 Aussie male surfers, top 10 women. And it was just like an introduction camp to understand the Olympics, what the next 4-year qualification process was going to look like. So when I got invited there, I kind of went, okay, maybe I am worthy. Maybe I am still worth chasing this. And it was really cool. At that camp, we had a few incredible speakers. We had Kathy Freeman speak to us, another Olympic gold medalist, Kenny Wallace, and then also Ben Crow, who's an incredible mindset and mindset coach. And then also Surfing Australia's head psychologist named Jason Patchell. And during the camp, they kind of encouraged us to understand who we are outside of surfing. They said, like, pro surfing's what you do, but it's not who you are. And it set me on this journey trying to understand who I was. It was the first time that I'd really started to think, like, maybe I don't have to base my self-worth and identity on my career and achievements, because, there's going to be one day I'm not the top surfer in my local area. There's going to be a day that I have to retire and do something else. And that was when I got challenged by my psychologist. He said, try and base your self-worth and your identity on your personal values and how well you can live to those values. So that set me on this trajectory sort of through my 20s to understand who I was as a person more. I read lots of books, watched lots of documentaries, listened to so many podcasts, and really looked for values in people who I was inspired by and looked up to. And I was like, how can I pull them into my lives? The 5 that I'd really tried to live by was responsibility, which for me is about, not being the victim and going, you know what, I've got to do something if I want to see change. The second was gratitude. My dad always drilled into me, gratitude is so important. So every day, just trying to look for the good things rather than the negative things. We all have both going on. Gratitude's just focusing on the good stuff a bit more often. The third's empathy, learning how to listen and connect with people and, be interested, not interesting. The fourth one was mindfulness. I feel like we're all becoming far, far less present. So having a mindfulness practice and being able to be present was important. And then the last one was kindness, being kind to myself, being kind to others, and being kind to the environment.
Cooper's story is like the high drama version of this. Elite athlete, his career ended, his identity was, he had an identity crisis, he was dropped by his sponsor. But this can happen to anyone, and I know this because it happened to me, and I could not stand up on a surfboard if my life depended on it. I was working at the Australian Women's Weekly magazine. I was on the online. I was in the digital department. It was at a time where I had been freelancing as a journalist. I started as a blogger. I worked my way up through the ranks and was writing for some of the most well-known online and print publications in Australia. And that was something that my ego had really grown to love. And when I introduced myself, I loved saying, I'm a journalist, I'm a staff writer at Women's Weekly. And even if it wasn't a magazine that was cool, it still carried prestige, right? My mum was impressed, my nana was impressed, and my nana is very, very difficult to impress. She was difficult to impress. So for me, having this sort of the kudos, if you will, of having this sort of big name backer that says that my writing is worthy of being seen in the public sphere was great for my ego. Some of my articles would go viral, and viral is the term viral obviously took on a whole literal meaning throughout the time of COVID. But prior to that, when we thought about going viral, we were really talking about this social currency of sweeping the interwebs in a way that you become part of a zeitgeist. And there were various times in my writing career where something I wrote hit a nerve in the public sort of arena, and it takes off on that wave. And when you're seeing so many likes on a story, so many comments on a story, so many people getting in touch saying, hey, we want to know more about it. We want to make a movie about it. We want to make a documentary about it. We want to talk to the people involved. It becomes this whole kind of being of its own. And I really liked that. I really did like that. And for me, falling into that career was something that happened to me as opposed to a conscious decision that I made. I really did love it until I didn't love it. And I was beginning to find that the pressure of the writing, the needing to keep up with the stories, I was a solo parent. There was a lot of pressure involved in that for me, being, so busy, having so much financial stress because I was paying a mortgage by myself. So when that ended, and how that ended was pretty messy, to be honest. I was told to go home one day and wait for further news. I was not on staff. I was not contracted. So they did nothing wrong. However, I had worked there. It was like a fairly permanent thing. I'd been there job sharing for, a year, and I was just told to go home and await further news. After there was a tumultuous time in upper leadership. There was a change in editors. A managing editor came in. She and I butted heads a number of times. And when I was told to go home and await further news, I was, a little bit, I guess, worried about it, but I didn't anticipate what actually happened, which was I was ghosted. Nobody spoke to me for a good few weeks before I realized that I had actually been fired from a job that I had allowed to become my identity. So my people on my team, my bosses on my team had been talking to me, but everyone was just hurry up and wait for further news from upper management. And essentially I was let go. Now, what happened then was I had this major, identity crisis, but it was a crisis of self-esteem. I realized that I was not shit hot. I was not this viral sensation. I was not even a valued member of a team. Apparently, I mean, I know that was the story that I told myself, because I was a valued member of my team. It was just a bigger managerial decision. But the story I told myself was that I was dispensable. I was, in fact, a piece of shit, because I didn't deserve a conversation. It didn't even warrant somebody sitting me down and letting me go. I didn't expect a gold watch. I mean, a gold watch would be lovely. I didn't expect a gold watch. I hadn't been there for long enough, but just the respect of saying thanks for what I had contributed and then letting me go with some respect and some grace, rather than ghosting me. And we know in this era of fast and furious online dating that ghosting is a big no, okay? It is a big no. And it all felt so heavy in my body, like that identity crisis, that self-esteem loss, that real second guessing and questioning who I thought that I needed to be in order to be a success in this profession. And I fell pretty low, and it was deeply, deeply uncomfortable. It was deeply uncomfortable. And I think Cooper really nailed it when he said, like, so much of his self-worth was based on external validation, because, you know, and when he was doing well, he felt amazing, and when he was doing poorly, he felt average. And that is something that I absolutely resonated with. And I think that many of us live with that every single day. At that time, you know, when articles would go viral or people would contact me to say that my words had resonated, I was winning, you know, I felt really great. It was all this external validation, and I was really needing it, really requiring that validation to feel like I was good and worthy and safe. So for you, like, it might not be going viral. You might not, you know, have that kind of presence online, but maybe it's a performance review, which can make or break your month, or can really drive your mood for a prolonged period. You know, when a client says yes or no, it might really like sway your entire kind of mood, how you show up in your life, how you show up with your family, a promotion that you get or you don't get. Maybe even it's just that sort of sense of comparison, when you're really like looking at a colleague, looking at somebody else and judging them as further ahead, doing better than you, clearly more successful than you. And that whole sort of sense of not good enough, not doing enough, not measuring up really impacts, really destabilizes how we're feeling about ourselves inside. And that's like when we're tying our value to our output, right? And then we wonder why we're like so exhausted and never measuring up. It's a fool's race. It's a fool's race that you can't win. And I'm really sort of navigating some of this too, you know, with my mum's death. I'm really asking, what is a good life, and what is achievement to me if nobody else is watching? And it really does feel like there's an element of my ego is kind of slipping away at the moment. External validation, like I'm not putting anything out there really in the public sphere. I am quietly writing behind the scenes. I'm really sort of slowing down and quietening down and going a little bit more inward. So it does feel like that ego is slipping away, but I do generally have a pretty large ego, so I'm quite sure that it'll come back again in some way, shape or form when I'm feeling a little more fortified by a time of rest. But right now I'm noticing that the small achievements are really feeling like the important achievements. And that is a distinct shift for me, you know, keeping that morning routine of meditation and morning writing and exercise feels like a huge achievement right now. If I do that rather than lying in bed, I feel like I'm winning the day. If we have a family dinner where there are no fights, that feels like a really big win for me at the moment, because my family has been very fractured over the last few months. So, you know, even having a family movie where everybody stays until the end and everyone enjoyed it and there was no conflict, that feels like a huge win, because there have been times where that has felt so far out of reach for us. So I also am finding like ticking just a couple of things off my list and not trying to do everything at once. That feels really big for me, because I'm usually just like, right, next. Let's just keep plowing through this to-do list. And now I'm like, I got so much time to do all the things. I just want to go really slowly. I keep likening myself at the moment at the gym, with anything I'm doing around the house. I'm a Clydesdale. I am just going slow and steady, one foot in front of the other right now. And that is completely enough. That is enough. These small wins are feeling really big. For me, when people ask me, what do I do? There isn't a simple answer. I do so many things. I'm an author, and I'm a speaker, and I'm a coach, and I do leadership development programs, and I do all of this stuff. And really, I often find myself, I'm listing it like, like a washing list or whatever. When realistically, what I'm sort of returning to now is like, I'm a person who feels really deeply. I don't think if I was in a, going for some kind of job in a, doing a leadership development program for a massive corporation, if I'd be going, you know what, I'm someone who feels deeply, and I feel like I would be able to bring that to your teams. Clearly we need to have a more articulate way to express what it is that we do, and the services that we can provide, or the ways that we can help people to achieve the outcomes that they want. But, for me, I'm sort of whittling myself down to, I'm somebody who really loves deeply. I'm somebody who, or loves enormously. I'm somebody who worries that I'm not doing enough to help my kids through their turbulent teens, and this sort of seems to resonate more with who I am rather than what it is that I do. Cooper discovered pretty much this at the Olympics camp, right? That what you do is not who you are. Who you are is tied to your values and to your beliefs and to your actual sort of your essence, to who you are at your very core. And sometimes the trap of this entire sort of subject isn't just in the big career moments. Sometimes it can be in the ways that we unwittingly or unknowingly or unintentionally make ourselves smaller. Co-founder of Boost Lab Skin Products, Lisa Schweihofer, helped me to really see this in a new way. She helped me to understand this differently, because Lisa wasn't an elite athlete, although I imagine she had elite elements to survive where she was at. Lisa was a stay-at-home mum in New Zealand with 3 kids under 4 for many years. As far as I'm concerned, that is an elite sport, an extreme sport. During that time in her life, that was many years before she founded Boost with her husband, Craig. But at that time, while Craig was out as the breadwinner and they would have dinner parties with Craig's colleagues, maybe executives or industry leaders, people would always turn to Lisa, and in making conversation, they'd be saying, so Lisa, what do you do? And for years, Lisa had the same answer until she realized the answer that she was giving was diminishing herself and in many ways making herself disappear.
We'd be in a social setting, but with people from work and things from Craig's work and things like that, executives and men and women, all that sort of thing, and to be like, oh, Lisa, what do you do? And I very quickly got rid of the word just. It was never, I'm just at home with the kids, I'm just a stay-at-home mum. It was like, I'm at home with the kids, or I take care of the home. It was that getting rid of that word just changes so much. And no one is ever just anything. Never. I don't care what you're doing. You're not just.
Was that a light bulb moment for you because you realized that you had been doing it?
Absolutely. And I thought, and it was probably my mentality as well, like I'm just at home with the kids, or I just do this. I don't contribute in any other way. And then I kind of went, fuck, I do. Like, no.
Yeah.
And I got rid of that word and made the attitude that you have when you get rid of that word changes as well.
I'm just How many times have you said it this week? I'm just checking in. I'm just following up. I'm just circling back. Oh my God, the circle back. But Lisa was talking about dinner parties and social settings, but this goes so much deeper. It's just part of the language that we use often that seems to sort of apologize for our existence. My mum, if we bring it back to that, my mum couldn't do much physically, okay? But she wasn't just a nana or just a disabled woman, you know. She was this entire person who also happened to be a nana, who also happened to have a disability. But my mum hadn't worked in 20 years and she couldn't do much. Like, she couldn't move much. She couldn't help around the house. She couldn't help with the kids. She could no longer cook. So often the things that we ascribe to achievement or valuable doing, she couldn't actually do because her body didn't work. So if we think about what she could do, like how did she create this impact in the world? What could she do? She could be herself, right? She could share her knowledge. It was how Mum made people feel that created the impact that was left by her. And so realizing that her worth or her impact or her capacity to create impact wasn't tied to ability or achievement really helped me to see things in a new way. Like how much of my own value or sense of me doing well was tied up with how well my career was going. You know, Mum was always around to listen to people. She didn't advise, how do I want to say this? She wasn't really into giving unsolicited advice. So she would listen quite impartially and she would kind of help people to come to a lot of their own understandings or decisions. But she would call it how it is. She'd be like, oh, don't be ridiculous. If someone was overthinking, overanalyzing, being critical, she'd be like, don't be ridiculous. And she would just give that the slap down. So helping people, I think, to even get out of their own heads, helping people to stop being sort of critical of themselves, that was such a gift. That was part of the impact that she really left. You know, all of her carers, the nurses, the registered nurses, so many people were coming in to see her in her last few days. And all of them were saying, thank you so much for everything you've taught me. And I was like, that's so interesting. Like, they're here serving her. They're here taking care of her daily needs. And yet they're all thanking her for all of the different things that she has taught them. She said so many times that her greatest achievement was her kids. And, you know, I'd love to take that. I'd like to take the mantle, that I'm the best thing that she ever did. But I think that, again, takes away from her own worth for just who she is and how she is, because she had a whole life that didn't involve me. And I think my mum even would underplay and undervalue her impact simply by being who she was. And that's interesting. That is interesting. And I hope that we don't all have to wait until we are dying or after death for us to realize that simply being ourselves is the greatest gift that we can give. And that's really what we call for. Everything else is just, you know, we can create, change, switch as much as we want, but who we are, obviously we can create, change and switch that too. But the essence of who we are and what's important to us, you know, that's the thing that we need to get super clear on. But Lisa really helped me to see something, and I think my mum really sort of cemented that. And that is that you're not just something. You actually fully are these things without apology, without needing to produce or perform or prove. That's it. You don't have to do anything. You just have to be precisely, absolutely, completely who you are, unless you're a massive asshole, and then you really need to have a look at that. But you know, we can't be unapologetically who we are if we are actually like closed-minded and cantankerous. But you know what I'm saying. So the question is less about what we do or who we are. I think that my next guest takes it to another level that is completely different again. Diane McGrath took it a step further for me. I have to say I really loved this interview. I could have talked with her all day. She is such a fascinating human who has really pushed herself to beyond limits that most people would ever like sort of approach. When 200,000 people applied for a one-way mission to colonize Mars, Diane made it to the final 100 candidates, right? She had 0 space qualifications. She wasn't an astronaut. She did have a PhD in sustainability, and she had an unshakable belief in asking one question. She didn't ask, why would they pick me? What do I have to offer? She didn't ask any of that. Her one question that I think really elevates her self-esteem and also her sense of self-worth is, why not? Why not me? Why not now? Why not this job? Okay, why not?
But when you saw the ad, it said, we're looking for astronauts. And I'd be like, oh, yeah, no, I'm not an astronaut. I don't know anything about
That's true,
astrophysics.
Yeah.
Physics. I don't know anything about anything. I don't know mechanics. I don't know aeronautical. I'm like, nah, not me.
Wow.
What do you think made you feel like, yeah, I could be an astronaut. I've got the chops.
I guess I didn't think of myself from the label of astronaut. I thought of myself as a person on Mars. And so the idea of what it could be and who this person could be, I'm always curious about the potential. I'm also fascinated by one of the limits that limit us, that we allow to limit us. Are they real? Are they perceived? What's the boundary of them? And then how can I engineer around them? Because I don't like that one. I'm going to change that. So, or maybe that's not a real limit, it's a perceived limit. So I'm always curious about the potential that we have that was untapped, and why not just let it go? Unleash yourself. My mother has this saying, she says, why not? Why not? And so when I often reflect on that when I'm making a decision. I don't just throw myself into it without thinking about it. I do a lot of risk assessment of it. I take calculated risks. But I often will reflect on the why not element too. Is there something about that idea or that endeavor or that dream, that goal, that it's worth why notting? Because the why not is not just about what's the worst that can happen. Life stays the same. It's also about what's the best that could happen. I remember a lecturer I had once said there should be no half-arsery in life, if you don't mind using that term straight up. So
Absolutely.
No half-arsery in my life. It's full-arsery or nothing.
We do the hard stuff to see what we're capable of. And I feel that is really something that you live your life by. It's a little bit of Kennedy. It's a little bit of your mum's why not. And it's a whole lot of you and your 2 feet. If somebody's listening right now who feels like they have a dream that is like too big or they're not qualified or they don't feel like they've got the balls even, what would you say to them to help them to move forward on it?
Give it a bit of a why not. Start with that question of why not, because then you start to reframe it for yourself, start to break down some of those barriers and perceptions of what's possible, because then you start to already see yourself as doing it, as succeeding. This is what success also looks like. And you can start to get ready for that success because you've seen it.
3 people, 3 very different lives. Cooper losing his sponsor at the peak of his career and discovering that his worth wasn't tied to his surfboard after all. He's gone on to have an amazing career in something that he never would have imagined earlier on in his sporting life. Lisa removed one tiny word and watched her entire sort of presence and how she felt about herself shift. And then there's Diane, training for 8 years to go to Mars. And when that fell apart, immediately asking, what else am I capable of? And then there's my mum, Carolyn, who created impact in the world simply by being who she was. Then there's me, I suppose. There's me who lost my job at the Weekly and then was questioning my identity and my value and my worth. And now here I am again, sort of questioning what's it all about, and really stripping back all the things that I thought that I needed to do in order to be successful, in order to feel like I am a valued, valuable, worthy citizen. What I'm really learning about is this sense of achievement when no one's watching, and what really makes me feel like I'm doing something meaningful. And it doesn't have to be meaningful in the grander scheme of the entire world, just meaningful to me. And I think all of us through this have sort of come to the same truth. You're simply not what you do. You are not your achievements. You are not your title. You are not your role. You are not your output. Your worth isn't based on external validation. And we need to stop apologizing for who we are and ask ourselves more questions like, what am I capable of? What's important to me? What feels meaningful to me? Because my value isn't just in what I can do, it's who I am and how I show up in that. So this week I ask you to think about, where are you tying your self-worth to your performance, and maybe what would shift if you could shift your identity out from, what you do. Maybe start to remove the word just from your vocabulary. Maybe we need to blacklist the word just from your vocabulary, and think about, what is your Mars? What is this one big, wild moonshot, Mars shot, where you can ask, what am I capable of? Because you are so much more than you achieve, and you always have been. So I know without any shadow of a doubt that you absolutely always will be.
I hope that you enjoyed listening to this episode of Big Stuff as much as I enjoyed recording it for you. Now, if you did enjoy this episode, it would really help me if you wanted to share it with just one person that you think is going to get something out of it. And also feel free to drop a comment. All of these things really help podcasts to gain more ears, and that's what we're really here for. Also, be sure to subscribe, then you will never miss an episode. If you want to find out more about me, who I am, what I do, then you can go and check me out at daniellecolley.com.au. I'll see you next episode for more big stuff.